The sun peeked through the clouds as Sofia Martinez hurried down the sidewalk, her backpack bouncing against her shoulder blades with each step. Her worn sneakers hit the pavement in a steady rhythm, while her mind raced with the melody she'd been trying to perfect for weeks. Her fingers twitched at her sides, playing invisible keys in the air, a habit her mother always teased her about. "You're going to wear out your fingertips before you even reach a piano," her mom would say with a laugh. Sofia smiled at the thought as she turned the corner toward Oak Ridge High School. The morning bell wouldn't ring for another 20 minutes, but she wasn't heading to class. Instead, she made her way to the music room where Mr. Reynolds, her music teacher, had asked to meet her before school started. The hallways were quiet except for the distant sound of the janitor's radio and the squeak of Sofia's shoes against the freshly waxed floor. When she reached the music room, she found the door already open, warm light spilling into the hallway. "Ah, there she is." Mr. Reynolds looked up from his desk with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. In his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and glasses that constantly slid down his nose, he had been teaching music at Oak Ridge High for over 20 years. "Right on time, Sofia." Sofia dropped her backpack on a nearby chair. "You said it was important?" Mr. Reynolds nodded, his expression brightening with excitement. "I have news. Potentially life-changing news for you." Sofia's heart skipped a beat. At 17, with college applications looming and her family's tight finances constantly on her mind, any good news was welcome. "You know the Hanson Scholarship for Musical Excellence I told you about?" Mr. Reynolds asked, leaning forward in his chair. "The one that covers full tuition at State University's School of Music?" Sofia's voice rose slightly. She'd been dreaming about applying but wasn't sure if she stood a chance. "That's the one. The application deadline is in 3 weeks and I think you should apply." Sofia shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "But Mr. Reynolds, that scholarship is for the best of the best. I've been playing since I was 5. But most of those applicants probably had professional lessons their whole lives." Mr. Reynolds shook his head firmly. "Raw talent matters more than fancy lessons, Sofia. And you have more natural talent in your pinky finger than most students I've taught in my entire career." The compliment made Sofia's cheeks warm, but doubt still clouded her thoughts. She thought about the upright piano at home, a second-hand gift from a neighbor who was moving away when Sofia was 10. It had 3 sticky keys and needed tuning badly, but it was her most prized possession. She practiced on it every day, sometimes until her fingers ached and her mother gently reminded her that dinner was getting cold. "The audition piece is challenging," Mr. Reynolds continued, pulling out some sheet music from his desk drawer. "Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. Have you played it before?" Sofia nodded. "Parts of it. I've never performed the whole thing, though. Well, you'll need to master it in 3 weeks. And here's where my good news comes in." Mr. Reynolds' eyes twinkled with excitement. "I've arranged for you to practice on the grand piano at the county courthouse." Sofia's mouth fell open. "The Steinway? The one they installed during the renovation last year?" "The very same. It's a Model D concert grand. The kind of piano you'll be playing at the audition. The kind of piano professional musicians perform on." Sofia could hardly believe what she was hearing. The courthouse's Steinway was legendary in their small town of Pine Creek. When it had been installed as part of the courthouse's centennial renovation, the local newspaper had run a front-page story about it. A few public concerts had been held there, but otherwise the magnificent instrument sat mostly unused except for special occasions. "How did you arrange that?" Sofia asked, stunned. Mr. Reynolds smiled. "I know someone who knows someone. The building manager owes me a favor. I taught his daughter years ago. He's agreed to let you practice there after courthouse hours on Fridays for the next 3 weeks. You'll have 1 hour each session from 5 to 6 p.m. Sofia felt a rush of excitement followed immediately by panic. But that's only 3 hours of practice time on the actual piano before the audition. "Better than nothing," Mr. Reynolds said. "And it will give you a feel for the instrument. You'll still practice on our school piano during lunch breaks and on your piano at home the rest of the time." Sofia took a deep breath, trying to process everything. The Hanson Scholarship would change her life completely. Her parents worked hard, her father at the local factory and her mother cleaning houses. But they had 3 other children besides Sofia. College seemed like an impossible dream without a scholarship. "Do my parents know about this?" she asked. "I called your mother yesterday." She cried, "Sofia." Mr. Reynolds' voice softened. "She's so proud of you." Sofia could imagine her mother's reaction. Rosa Martinez had always been her biggest supporter, sitting beside her during those early years of practice, encouraging her even when the neighbors complained about the noise. "When do I start at the courthouse?" Sophia asked, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "This Friday. Here's your permission slip and the security information." Mr. Reynolds handed her a folder. "You'll need to show ID at the front desk, and Mrs. Patel, the evening clerk, will let you into the main hall where the piano is. You'll have exactly 1 hour, so use it wisely." The first bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until classes began. Sophia carefully placed the folder in her backpack, her mind already racing with plans for how to make the most of her courthouse practice sessions. "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I won't let you down." "I know you won't." His smile was warm and confident. "Now get to class before you're late." The rest of the week passed in a blur. Sophia spent every spare minute practicing, her fingers flying over the keys of the school's old upright during lunch breaks, then returning home to work on her own piano until bedtime. Her younger siblings complained about the constant music, but her parents shushed them, understanding the importance of what Sophia was working toward. By the time Friday arrived, Sophia had memorized most of the ballade, though certain passages still gave her trouble. She knew those tricky sections would sound completely different on a properly tuned grand piano, and she could hardly contain her excitement as the final school bell rang. She rushed home to change out of her school clothes and grab a quick dinner. Her mother had prepared her favorite meal, arroz con pollo, and the whole family sat down together, an unusual occurrence on weeknights. "We're so proud of you, Mika," her father said, his work-roughened hand reaching across the table to squeeze hers. "This scholarship, it could open doors we never dreamed of." "I haven't won anything yet, Papa," Sophia reminded him, not wanting the family to get their hopes up too high. "But you will." Her 10-year-old brother chimed in with complete confidence. "You're the best piano player in the whole town." Sophia ruffled his hair with a laugh. "There's not much competition in Pine Creek." "Well, you're still the best," her brother insisted. At 4:30, Sophia gathered her sheet music and a small recording device Mr. Reynolds had lent her so she could listen to her practice sessions later. Her mother insisted on driving her to the courthouse, though it was only a 15-minute walk. "I want to see this fancy piano myself," Rosa said with a smile as they pulled up to the imposing stone building that housed the county's legal system. The courthouse was an old structure with tall columns and wide stone steps leading to heavy wooden doors. Though Sophia had lived in Pine Creek her whole life, she'd only been inside once on a school field trip years ago. Inside, the lobby was cool and quiet, with polished marble floors that magnified every footstep. A security guard sat at the front desk looking bored as he scrolled through his phone. He glanced up as Sophia and her mother approached. "Can I help you?" he asked, setting his phone down. "I'm Sophia Martinez," she said, showing him the permission slip Mr. Reynolds had given her. "I'm here to practice on the piano in the main hall. Mrs. Patel is supposed to let me in?" The guard looked over the paper and checked Sophia's school ID, then picked up his phone to call someone. After a brief conversation, he nodded. "Mrs. Patel will be right down. You can wait over there." He pointed to a row of wooden benches along the wall. A few minutes later, a middle-aged woman in a navy blue suit appeared from a side hallway. "Sophia, I'm Mrs. Patel." She extended her hand with a warm smile. "Mr. Reynolds has told me all about you and your scholarship audition." "Follow me and I'll show you to the piano." Sophia turned to her mother. "You don't have to wait, Mom. I can walk home after." Rosa hesitated. "Are you sure? It'll be getting dark. I'll be fine. It's not that far." Sophia gave her mother a quick hug. "I'll see you at home." After her mother left, Sophia followed Mrs. Patel through a series of hallways until they reached a set of double doors. When Mrs. Patel pushed them open, Sophia's breath caught in her throat. The main hall was magnificent. High ceilings with ornate moldings, tall windows letting in the late afternoon light. And at the far end, on a slightly raised platform, stood the Steinway grand piano, its polished black surface gleaming like a mirror. "It's beautiful," Sophia whispered. Mrs. Patel smiled. "Most people don't appreciate what a special instrument it is. The acoustics in this room are excellent too." She checked her watch. "You have until 6 Inc. I'll be at the front desk if you need anything." Left alone in the vast space, Sophia approached the piano slowly, almost reverently. She ran her fingers lightly over the smooth wood, then carefully lifted the lid to reveal the keys. Perfect ivory and ebony rectangles. Nothing like the yellowed, chipped keys of her piano at home. She set her sheet music on the stand, though she hardly needed it anymore, and adjusted the bench. Then, taking a deep breath, she placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The sound that filled the room was unlike anything she had ever created before. Rich, resonant, and perfectly in tune, the notes of Chopin's ballade floated up to the high ceiling and seemed to hang there, each one distinct, yet blending seamlessly with the next. The piano responded to her lightest touch, allowing her to bring out nuances in the music that had been impossible on lesser instruments. For the first time, Sophia understood what her music could truly sound like, and in that moment, as the beautiful melody surrounded her, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she really did have a chance at winning the scholarship that would change her life forever. On the third floor of the courthouse, Judge William Harrington sat at his desk surrounded by stacks of case files. The room was quiet except for the occasional rustle of paper and the ticking of the antique clock on the wall, a gift from Eleanor on their 30th anniversary. He glanced at it briefly, the familiar ache settling in his chest as it did whenever he thought of his late wife. 18 months had passed since cancer took her, but the wound felt as fresh as the day she'd slipped away, holding his hand and telling him not to work too late. He'd broken that promise more times than he could count. These days, he often stayed at the courthouse well into the evening, finding it easier to face the empty rooms filled with law books than the empty rooms at home filled with memories. At 65, Judge Harrington had served on the bench for 23 years. He'd earned a reputation throughout Pine Creek County for his sharp mind and unwavering commitment to the letter of the law. Some called him cold, others called him fair. Nobody called him lenient. Since Eleanor's death, even his closest colleagues had noticed the change in him. His already stern demeanor had hardened further. His patience, never his strongest quality, had worn impossibly thin. The courthouse staff had learned to avoid him when possible, speaking in hushed tones when he passed in the hallway. Judge Harrington rubbed his tired eyes and reached for the next file. The Henderson divorce case was particularly messy, with custody issues that would require his full attention. He opened the folder and began reading the details, making notes in the margins with his fountain pen, another habit from a different era. He had just finished reviewing the financial statements when the first notes drifted up through the floorboards. Faint at first, then growing stronger. Piano music. The judge frowned, looking up from his work. The courthouse had been nearly empty when he'd last stepped out for coffee an hour ago. Most of the staff left by 5, and it was now approaching 6. The music continued, growing more complex. Clearly not someone simply testing the keys, but an actual performance. Judge Harrington tried to return to the Henderson file but found his concentration broken. The piece being played was technically impressive, with runs of notes cascading up and down the keyboard. Normally he might have appreciated the skill involved, but today it was just one more irritation in a long week of irritations. He set down his pen with more force than necessary and pushed back from his desk. The renovation committee had fought hard for that Steinway last year, arguing it would bring cultural events to the courthouse and improve community relations. The judge had voted against it, seeing it as an unnecessary expense. He'd been outvoted. Now, as he strode down the hallway toward the staircase, his polished leather shoes clicking against the marble floor, he remembered his objections. That piano will be nothing but a distraction, he'd told the committee. The courthouse is a place of law, not entertainment. The music grew louder as he descended the stairs, his hand sliding along the smooth wooden banister. The performer was playing something classical, Chopin if he wasn't mistaken. Eleanor would have known immediately. She'd been the musical one in their marriage, filling their home with beautiful sounds that he now missed more than he could express. But this wasn't their home, and whoever was playing had no business being there after hours. Rules existed for a reason, and as a judge, he believed in their enforcement, consistently and without exception. As he approached the main hall, he could see through the partially open doors. A teenage girl sat at the piano, her back straight, head slightly bowed in concentration as her fingers moved across the keys. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a plain blue sweater, hardly the formal attire one should wear when playing such an instrument in such a setting. For a moment, Judge Harrington stood in the doorway watching. Despite his annoyance, he couldn't help but notice that she played well. Very well, in fact, but that didn't change the fact that she was there without proper authorization. The courthouse wasn't a practice room for local students. He pushed the door open fully and walked into the hall, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The girl didn't hear him at first, too absorbed in the music. He cleared his throat loudly. She jumped slightly but continued playing, glancing over her shoulder with a quick, nervous smile before turning back to the keys. "Excuse me," the judge said, his voice cutting through the music. When she didn't immediately stop, his irritation flared. "Young lady, I'm speaking to you." This time, Sophia's hands froze above the keys. The last notes hung in the air for a moment before fading away. She turned on the bench to face him, her expression uncertain. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb anyone," she said. "Mrs. Patel said I could practice here until 6. I think I have about 10 more minutes." Judge Harrington looked at his watch with a frown. "It's 5:53, and that's beside the point. Who authorized you to use this piano?" Sophia reached for her backpack, which sat on the floor beside the bench, and pulled out the permission slip. "Mr. Reynolds. He's my music teacher at Oak Ridge High. He arranged it with the building manager. I'm practicing for a scholarship audition." The judge took the paper and scanned it quickly. It was signed by the building manager, but that didn't improve his mood. Tom Wilson had always been too accommodating, too willing to bend the rules. The courthouse wasn't a music school, and this Steinway was county property, not a practice instrument for every aspiring pianist in the district. "This piano," Judge Harrington said, his voice cold, "cost the taxpayers of this county $87,000. It's not here for high school students to bang on?" Sophia's face flushed. "I wasn't banging on it, sir. I was being very careful." Nevertheless, the judge continued as if she hadn't spoken. "The courthouse closes to the public at 5 o'clock. Official events require proper paperwork and approval from the administrative office, not just a note from a music teacher." "But I have approval," Sophia insisted, pointing to the paper in his hand. "And Mrs. Patel let me in. She said it was fine." Judge Harrington folded the paper and handed it back to her. "Mrs. Patel isn't authorized to make those decisions. Neither is Mr. Wilson, for that matter. This building houses our justice system. It's not a concert hall or a practice room." Sophia bit her lip, clearly trying to hold back tears. "I only have 2 more Fridays before my audition. Please, sir, I don't have access to a grand piano anywhere else. My family can't—" The judge held up his hand, cutting her off. "Your personal circumstances, while unfortunate, are not relevant to courthouse policy. Pack up your things now. I have work to finish, and this disruption has already taken up too much of my time." Sophia's shoulders slumped. She began gathering her sheet music with trembling hands. Judge Harrington watched her, feeling a twinge of something that might have been guilt, quickly dismissed. Rules were rules. Order had to be maintained. If he made an exception for this girl, where would it end? "I'll speak to Mr. Wilson on Monday about proper protocols," he added, his tone slightly less harsh but still firm. "In the future, school functions should remain at school." Sophia nodded without looking up, still collecting her music. Her hands were shaking so badly that several sheets slipped from her grasp and scattered across the floor. She knelt quickly to retrieve them, a few tears finally escaping despite her efforts to hold them back. Judge Harrington sighed. This was exactly the kind of emotional scene he'd hoped to avoid. He turned to leave, planning to return to his office while she finished gathering her things. "I'm sorry about the disruption," Sophia said quietly to his back. "This scholarship means everything to me. I've been playing piano since I was 5, but I've never had the chance to play on an instrument like this. It makes such a difference." The judge paused but didn't turn around. "I'm sure the school has a piano you can use." "It's not the same." Her voice was soft but determined. "The school piano is old and out of tune. The audition will be on a Steinway just like this one. If I could just have these 3 hours of practice time that Mr. Reynolds arranged. As I said, your personal situation is not relevant to courthouse policy." Judge Harrington's voice was final. "Good evening, Miss Martinez. Sophia Martinez. Miss Martinez, I suggest you direct your concerns to your school's music department. Now please finish gathering your things and leave. The courthouse is closed." He began walking toward the door again, eager to escape the uncomfortable situation and return to the familiar comfort of legal briefs and case law, things that made sense, things that followed logical patterns unlike teenage girls and their emotional pleas. Behind him, he heard a small sound, not quite a sob but close, then the rustle of paper, as Sophia continued collecting her scattered sheet music. He should keep walking. He had the Henderson case to finish. He had 3 more files after that. He didn't have time for this distraction, and yet he found himself slowing his steps. Something about the girl's dedication struck a chord. Eleanor had been like that with her music, passionate, determined. She'd taught piano for 40 years, shaping the minds and talents of countless students. She would have been disappointed in his coldness toward this young musician. But Eleanor wasn't here, and in her absence he'd found that following the rules, maintaining order, was the only thing that made sense anymore. Exceptions led to chaos. Emotions clouded judgment. He'd learned that in the courtroom, and he applied it to his life. Judge Harrington squared his shoulders and continued toward the door. As he reached for the handle, he heard the bench scrape against the floor behind him. One last look at the magnificent instrument, he supposed. He couldn't blame the girl for that. What he didn't expect was the sound that followed, gentle, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. Sophia had sat down at the piano again and begun to play something new. Not the Chopin piece from before, but something slower, more haunting. The judge turned, words of reprimand ready on his lips. She was directly defying his order to leave. But as the melody took shape, the words died in his throat. He knew this piece. Of course he knew it. He'd heard it countless times over 40 years of marriage, in their living room, at recitals, on their anniversary. Clair de Lune, Debussy's masterpiece and Eleanor's favorite piece to play. Judge Harrington stood frozen by the door, his hand still on the handle, as the familiar notes washed over him like a wave from the past. The notes of Clair de Lune drifted through the courthouse hall like gentle moonlight. Soft, ethereal, and hauntingly familiar to Judge Harrington. His hand remained frozen on the door handle as the melody wrapped around him, transporting him instantly to another time. Another place. Eleanor at their old upright piano, her fingers dancing across the keys while evening light spilled through the living room windows. Eleanor in a blue dress at their 20th anniversary party, playing this very piece as friends and family watched in admiration. Eleanor in her hospital bed, humming the melody weakly when her strength no longer allowed her to play. The music continued, and Judge Harrington found himself unable to move. Sophia played with surprising sensitivity for someone so young, capturing the delicate emotion of the piece without overdoing it. Her technique wasn't perfect. There were a few hesitations, a missed note here and there, but the heart was unmistakably there. Slowly, the judge turned away from the door. His feet seemed to move of their own accord, carrying him back toward the piano. Sophia hadn't noticed his return. Her eyes closed as she leaned into the music, swaying slightly with the gentle rise and fall of the melody. Judge Harrington stood at the edge of the raised platform, listening. When was the last time he'd really listened to music? Since Eleanor's death, he'd avoided it entirely. The radio in his car remained off. The stereo system at home gathered dust. Music belonged to a part of his life that was over now, a part that included warmth and companionship, things he'd walled himself off from in the 18 months since becoming a widower. Yet here it was again, finding him in the most unexpected place. As Sophia approached the middle section of the piece, where the music swells before returning to its peaceful theme, Judge Harrington felt something shift inside him. A dam breaking, a wall crumbling. His throat tightened, and to his horror he felt moisture gathering in his eyes. He must have made some sound, a sharp intake of breath perhaps, because Sophia's eyes flew open. Her hands froze above the keys when she saw him standing there. The music stopped abruptly, leaving the hall in sudden silence. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, standing up from the bench. "I didn't mean to, I was just—" She stumbled over her words, clearly expecting more anger from the stern judge, but Judge Harrington wasn't angry anymore. He stood perfectly still, struggling to compose himself, to rebuild the walls that had protected him for so long. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, almost uncertain. "Where did you learn that piece?" Sophia blinked, surprised by the question. "My grandmother taught me," she answered cautiously. "She loved Debussy. She said Clair de Lune was special, that it could speak to people when words couldn't." The judge nodded slowly. "Your grandmother was a wise woman." Sophia relaxed slightly, though confusion still showed on her face. "It wasn't part of my audition program. I just I don't know why I played it just now. It felt right somehow. Judge Harrington moved closer to the piano, his eyes drawn to the sheet music still scattered across the bench and floor. It was my wife's favorite, he said quietly, the words escaping before he could stop them. She played it at our wedding. And on every anniversary after that. Understanding dawned in Sophia's eyes. Oh, she said softly. Then after a pause, was she a pianist? A piano teacher. For 40 years. The judge's gaze shifted to the Steinway, its polished surface reflecting the fading evening light from the tall windows. She would have loved this instrument. An awkward silence fell between them. The teenage girl and the aging judge, strangers connected for a moment by a piece of music that meant something to both of them. Sophia bent down to gather the last of her scattered papers. I really am sorry for disturbing you, she said. I'll go now. Judge Harrington cleared his throat. How long have you been playing? Sophia straightened up, clutching her music to her chest. Since I was 5. 12 years now. And this scholarship you mentioned, it's important to you? She nodded, a spark returning to her eyes. It's for State University's School of Music. Full tuition. Without it, she trailed off, then squared her shoulders. My parents work really hard, but college would be difficult without a scholarship, especially for something like music. The judge found himself thinking of Eleanor again, of how she'd always supported young musicians, especially those who couldn't afford expensive lessons or instruments. She'd often taught students for free when their families couldn't pay, telling him, talent shouldn't be wasted because of money. He glanced at his watch. It was past 6 now. He should be returning to his work, to the Henderson case and the others waiting on his desk. Instead, he heard himself say, play it again. Sophia looked startled. Excuse me, Claire de Lune, play it again. The complete piece this time. Still confused but seemingly afraid to question this unexpected turn of events, Sophia carefully set her music back on the stand and returned to the bench. She took a deep breath, positioned her hands over the keys, and began again from the beginning. Judge Harrington moved to one of the wooden benches along the wall and sat down. He closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. With each note, memories of Eleanor surfaced, not just the painful ones of her final days, but earlier ones too. Their first apartment with the second-hand piano they'd squeezed into the tiny living room. Summer evenings on the porch humming together as fireflies blinked in the yard. The Christmas she'd surprised him with tickets to the symphony in the city. When Sophia finished, the final notes lingering in the air before fading away, the judge opened his eyes to find his cheeks wet with tears he hadn't realized he'd shed. He quickly wiped them away with his handkerchief, embarrassed but also feeling strangely lighter than he had in months. That was beautiful, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Your grandmother taught you well, Sophia smiled hesitantly. Thank you. My technique still needs work, but technique can be taught, Judge Harrington interrupted. What you have, the feeling, the expression, that's much harder to learn. Sophia's smile widened. That's what my grandmother always said. She told me to play from my heart first, my hands second. Smart woman. The judge stood up, smoothing his suit jacket in an automatic gesture. When is your audition? 3 weeks from tomorrow. I only have 2 more Friday practice sessions here before then. Her expression fell slightly. Or I did have them. I understand if you still want me to leave. Judge Harrington considered for a moment. Rules were important. Order was necessary. But Eleanor had always accused him of being too rigid, too unwilling to see the exceptions that sometimes deserved to be made. Friday evenings 5 to 6, he said finally. That was the arrangement? Sophia nodded, hope beginning to show in her eyes. I'll speak with Mr. Wilson. We'll need proper paperwork, an official request from your school, insurance coverage in case of damage to the instrument. He was thinking aloud now, already mentally drafting the necessary documents. But I don't see why we can't accommodate your practice sessions, provided everything is in order. Really? Sophia's face lit up. You'd do that? The judge nodded, feeling strangely satisfied by her reaction. Additionally, he continued, surprising himself, I typically work late on Fridays. If you don't mind an audience, you could extend your practice time until 6:30. Sophia's eyes widened. That would be amazing. An extra half hour each week would help so much with the difficult sections of the ballade. The Chopin piece you were playing when I came in? Yes, Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It's the required piece for the scholarship audition. Judge Harrington nodded thoughtfully. I'd like to hear it from the beginning next time. Eleanor always said Chopin was best understood when heard in full, not in fragments. I'd be happy to play it for you, Sophia said, gathering her things with new energy. And maybe I could play Clair de Lune again too? If you'd like. The question caught him off guard, touching something vulnerable that he'd kept carefully protected. But instead of retreating behind his usual wall of formality, he found himself nodding. I think I would like that very much, Miss Martinez. As Sophia packed up her backpack, the judge noticed the time again. It's getting dark. How are you getting home? Walking? It's not far, about 15 minutes. Judge Harrington frowned. Not alone at this hour. I'll drive you. Oh, that's not necessary. I insist, he said, his tone brooking no argument. I'm heading out now anyway. This was a lie. He had intended to work for at least another 2 hours, but he suddenly found himself wanting to ensure the girl's safe return home. Eleanor would have insisted on it, and for the first time in months, he felt certain about what his wife would have wanted him to do. As they walked together toward the courthouse parking lot, an awkward silence fell between them again. They were strangers still, a stern judge and a hopeful young pianist, yet something had shifted. A connection had formed, unexpected and fragile, built on shared reverence for a piece of music that spoke to them both. Judge Harrington? Sophia asked as they reached his car, a sensible sedan he'd owned for years. Yes? Thank you. Not just for the ride, but for listening. To the music, I mean. The judge opened the passenger door for her, a courtesy that came automatically from years of doing the same for Eleanor. Sometimes, he said quietly, we need to be reminded of the things we've been avoiding, even when it hurts. Sophia nodded as if she understood, though he doubted someone so young could truly grasp what he meant. Yet there was wisdom in her eyes beyond her years, the kind that comes from passion and dedication to something meaningful. As Judge Harrington started the car, he realized that for the first time since Eleanor's death, he was looking forward to the coming Friday, and the small spark of anticipation felt like the beginning of something he had thought was lost forever. A tentative step back toward life. Judge Harrington's sedan pulled up in front of a modest 2-story house with peeling, white paint and a small, well-kept garden. Christmas lights still hung from the porch eaves despite it being February, probably left up to save the trouble of taking them down and putting them back up again, the judge thought. He recognized the practicality in that. This is me, Sophia said, gathering her backpack and sheet music. Thanks again for the ride. Before she could open her door, the front door of the house swung open. A woman stepped onto the porch, her worried expression visible even in the growing darkness. When she spotted the unfamiliar car, she came down the steps quickly. That's my mom, Sophia explained. She probably got worried when it got dark. Judge Harrington nodded. I should explain the situation to her. Sophia looked startled. Oh, you don't have to. But the judge was already getting out of the car. Old-fashioned manners, Eleanor had always called them. In their 40 years together, she'd never quite broken him of the habit of seeing conversations through properly face to face. Sophia, her mother called, approaching the car cautiously. Who is this? Sophia climbed out and hurried around to her mother's side. Mom, this is Judge Harrington from the courthouse. He gave me a ride home. The woman's eyes widened with alarm. Judge, Sophia, what happened? Are you in some kind of trouble? No, nothing like that, Sophia assured her quickly. Judge Harrington stepped forward, extending his hand. Mrs. Martinez, I'm William Harrington. I apologize for any concern I may have caused. Your daughter was practicing at the courthouse piano as arranged, and I simply wanted to ensure she got home safely after dark. Relief washed over Mrs. Martinez's face as she shook his hand. Thank you, Judge, that's very kind. Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee? It's the least I can offer. The invitation caught him off guard. His instinct was to decline politely and return to his solitary evening routine. Yet something made him hesitate. Perhaps the genuine warmth in Mrs. Martinez's smile, or the hopeful look on Sophia's face. That would be nice. Thank you, he heard himself say. The inside of the Martinez home was warm and lived in. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable looking. Family photos covered most flat surfaces, and from somewhere in the back of the house came the sound of children laughing. The small living room was dominated by an old upright piano pushed against one wall, its wood worn but well polished. Please sit down, Mrs. Martinez said, gesturing to the sofa. "I'll get that coffee." As she disappeared into the kitchen, Sophia set her music on top of the piano and glanced nervously at the judge. "It's not much compared to the Steinway," she said, nodding toward the upright. "But it's been in our family forever." Judge Harrington walked over to examine it. The piano showed its age: yellowed keys, scratches on the wood, a slight water ring on the top, but it had clearly been cared for. "How does it sound?" "3 sticky keys and it needs tuning," Sophia admitted with a small smile. "But it got me this far." Before the judge could respond, 2 young boys burst into the room, chasing each other and skidding to a halt when they spotted the unfamiliar visitor. "Who are you?" the younger one asked bluntly. "Luis." "That's rude," Sophia scolded. "This is Judge Harrington. He works at the courthouse." The older boy's eyes widened. "Are you going to jail, Sophia?" Judge Harrington surprised himself by chuckling. No one's going to jail. I just gave your sister a ride home." Mrs. Martinez returned with a tray holding coffee cups and a plate of cookies. "Boys, go finish your homework. Now, please." With one last curious look at the judge, the children disappeared back down the hallway. "I hope they didn't bother you," Mrs. Martinez said, setting the tray down. "They get excited when we have visitors." "Not at all," the judge replied, accepting a cup of coffee. "How many children do you have?" 4. Sophia is the oldest, then Miguel, who's 13, Luis, who's 10, and Gabriela, our youngest, who's 7. Pride was evident in her voice. All of them play music, but Sophia was the one who really took to it. They settled into conversation, and Judge Harrington found himself gradually relaxing. There was something soothing about the Martinez home. Perhaps its unpretentious warmth, so different from his own silent, orderly house. "Sophia tells me you're a piano teacher," Mrs. Martinez said after a while. The judge looked confused. "I'm not—" "No, Mom," Sophia interrupted quickly. "I said his wife was a piano teacher." "Oh." Mrs. Martinez's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm so sorry. I misunderstood." "It's quite all right," Judge Harrington assured her, though the mention of Eleanor sent a familiar pang through his chest. "Yes, my wife taught piano for 40 years. She passed away 18 months ago." Mrs. Martinez's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm very sorry for your loss." An awkward silence followed, broken when Sophia said, "Judge Harrington is going to let me keep practicing at the courthouse. He's even giving me extra time." "Really?" Mrs. Martinez looked at the judge with surprised gratitude. "That's wonderful news. This scholarship means everything to Sophia." "So I gather," he replied. "She plays very well." "Your mother taught you?" Sophia said. He directed the question to Mrs. Martinez. She nodded. "My mother was a piano teacher in Mexico before we moved here. She taught Sophia from the time she could reach the keys. When Mama got arthritis and couldn't play anymore, Sophia would play for her every day after school." "Is your mother still living?" the judge asked. A shadow passed over Mrs. Martinez's face. "No, we lost her 3 years ago. But her music lives on through Sophia." The judge nodded, understanding all too well. Music has a way of preserving memories. "That's exactly what Mama used to say," Mrs. Martinez replied, looking at him with new interest. "She said music was a bridge between people, between generations." As they continued talking, the judge learned more about the Martinez family. Mr. Martinez worked long hours at a manufacturing plant outside town. Mrs. Martinez cleaned houses and offices to help make ends meet. They'd saved for years to send Sophia to college, but the full music scholarship would make all the difference. "Sophia has the talent," Mrs. Martinez said. "Mr. Reynolds tells us she could go far with the right opportunities." Judge Harrington thought of his earlier harshness toward the girl, how close he'd come to destroying one of those opportunities, and felt a twinge of shame. "Would you play something for us, Sophia?" her mother asked suddenly. "Judge Harrington should hear what you sound like on your own piano, too." Sophia hesitated, glancing at the judge. "It's not the same as the Steinway." "Every piano has its own voice," Judge Harrington said, surprising himself with words Eleanor had often used. "I'd like to hear yours." With a nod, Sophia moved to the piano bench and opened her music. But instead of the Chopin she'd been practicing earlier, she turned to Claire de Lune again. As she began to play, the judge noticed how differently it sounded on this old upright. Warmer somehow, less brilliant but more intimate. The sticky keys were noticeable, causing small hesitations in the melody, Yet there was something endearing about the imperfection. Mrs. Martinez watched her daughter with quiet pride. But the judge noticed her also watching him, seeing his emotional response to the music. When Sophia finished, he blinked rapidly, fighting back the emotion that still caught him off guard. "Beautiful," he said simply. Mrs. Martinez smiled knowingly. "It was your wife's favorite," Sophia mentioned. The judge nodded. "Eleanor played it at our wedding. And many times after? She taught students?" Mrs. Martinez asked gently. "Yes. For decades. Our house was always filled with music, with young people coming and going for lessons." He paused, realizing it had been a long time since he'd spoken about Eleanor to anyone. She believed everyone deserved a chance to learn music, regardless of their circumstances. She often taught students for free when their families couldn't afford lessons. Something shifted in Mrs. Martinez's expression. A new understanding, perhaps. Sophia had a piano teacher for a while after Mama couldn't teach anymore. Mrs. Harrington at the community center. "She never charged us full price," said Sophia's talent was payment enough. The judge froze, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. "What did you say?" "Her teacher, Mrs. Harrington, Eleanor Harrington. She taught at the community center on Thursday afternoons." Mrs. Martinez's eyes widened suddenly. "Oh, was she—" "My wife," the judge confirmed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Eleanor taught at the community center for years." Sophia had turned on the piano bench, her face a picture of astonishment. "Mrs. Harrington was your wife? But I never made the connection. I mean, I knew she was married to a judge, but I never thought—" "You were one of Eleanor's students?" Judge Harrington asked, still processing this revelation. Sophia nodded slowly. "For almost 2 years, until she got sick. She was the one who helped me prepare for my first competition. She's the reason I started playing Debussy." The judge set down his coffee cup, his hand suddenly unsteady. All this time, this talented young pianist had been one of Eleanor's students. One of the many she'd spoken about at dinner. Whose progress she'd charted with such care and pride. "She talked about you," he said, memories flooding back. "A gifted girl from a musical family. She said you had exceptional expression, even when your technique needed work." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "She was the best teacher I ever had, besides my grandmother. When she got sick and had to stop teaching, I was heartbroken. I went to visit her once in the hospital, brought her flowers. But I never knew what happened after." "She would have been so proud to see how far you've come," the judge said, his voice rough with emotion. Mrs. Martinez wiped away a tear of her own. "It's like Mama always said. Music connects us in ways we don't always understand. What are the chances that you would be the one to find Sophia playing at the courthouse today?" Judge Harrington thought about the series of events that had brought him to this moment. His decision to work late, his irritation at the music, his initial harshness toward Sophia. If any one of those things had been different, he might never have discovered this connection to Eleanor, this living legacy of her teaching. "I don't believe in coincidences," he said finally. Eleanor would say it was meant to be. For the first time in 18 months, saying his wife's name didn't bring only pain. There was something else, too. A bittersweet comfort in knowing that her influence lived on in this talented young woman sitting at the piano. In this warm family home so full of the love of music that Eleanor had devoted her life to sharing. The following Friday, Sophia arrived at the courthouse at 4:55 p.m., 5 minutes earlier than scheduled. Her heart raced with a mixture of nervousness and excitement as she climbed the wide stone steps. The security guard recognized her this time, nodding as she showed her new official permission slip, properly signed and stamped, just as Judge Harrington had promised. "He's waiting for you in the main hall," the guard said, surprising her. "Been there for about 15 minutes already." Sophia thanked him and made her way through the now familiar hallways. When she pushed open the double doors to the main hall, she found Judge Harrington sitting on one of the wooden benches, a newspaper folded neatly on his lap. He stood when he saw her. "You're early," he said, though his tone held none of the coldness from their first meeting. "I didn't want to waste any time," Sophia replied, setting her backpack down and pulling out her sheet music. "The audition is in 2 weeks now." The judge nodded. "I've arranged for you to have the full hour and a half today, and I took the liberty of having the piano tuned yesterday." Sophia's eyes widened. "You had it tuned for me?" He looked slightly embarrassed. "It was due for maintenance anyway. But yes, I wanted to make sure it was in perfect condition for your practice." "Thank you," Sophia said sincerely. "That's incredibly kind." Judge Harrington waved away her thanks. I'll leave you to practice now unless. Sophia prompted when he didn't continue. Unless you wouldn't mind if I stayed to listen for a while. I have some work I could do later, Sophia smiled. I'd like that, actually. Having an audience might help me prepare for the audition. She settled at the piano, arranged her music, and began with some warm-up scales. The judge returned to his bench, watching quietly as her fingers flew up and down the keyboard. The piano did sound different, crisper, more resonant. Each note rang clear and true. After warming up, Sophia turned to the Chopin ballade. This is the piece I need to perfect for the audition, she explained. It's challenging, especially the coda at the end. Judge Harrington nodded. Eleanor always said Chopin was testing pianists with his endings, seeing if they could maintain control even as the music becomes more emotional. Sophia took a deep breath and began to play. The ballade started simply enough, but soon grew in complexity and emotion. As she played, she occasionally glanced at the judge, who sat with his eyes closed, completely absorbed in the music. When she reached the difficult coda, her fingers stumbled slightly over the rapid notes. She stopped, frustrated. Sorry, she said. That part always gives me trouble. Don't apologize, the judge said. Even Eleanor struggled with Chopin's codas. She used to say they were like trying to capture a waterfall with your hands. Sophia smiled at the comparison. That's exactly how it feels. Try again, he encouraged. But this time, don't think about the technical difficulty. Think about what the music is saying. She nodded and positioned her hands again. This time, instead of focusing on her fingers, she thought about the emotional journey of the piece, the story it told. Somehow this made the difficult passage flow more naturally. When she finished, Judge Harrington applauded softly. Much better, he said. You have a gift for expression. Eleanor was right about that. Sophia beamed at the praise. Would you tell me more about her? About how she taught? The judge's expression softened. She believed in teaching the heart of music first, the technique second. She said too many teachers did it backward. I remember that, Sophia said, nodding. She used to tell me to feel the music before I played it, to imagine what the composer was experiencing when they wrote it. For the next several minutes, as Sophia continued practicing, Judge Harrington shared stories about Eleanor. How she'd taught piano to generations of children in Pine Creek. How she'd organized recitals for her students in nursing homes and hospitals. How she'd never turned away a student who couldn't afford lessons. She sounds like she was an amazing person, Sophia said during a break. I wish I'd known her better. So do I, the judge replied quietly. Sometimes I think I didn't appreciate her enough when she was here. An idea began forming in Sophia's mind, a way to honor the woman who had helped shape her as a musician. Judge Harrington, would it be okay if I played Claire de Lune at my audition too? As an encore piece after the required Chopin? The judge looked surprised. I thought the audition had specific requirements. The main piece is required, but we're allowed to prepare a short additional piece of our choice. I was going to play a Bach prelude, but I think Claire de Lune would mean more. Judge Harrington was silent for a moment, clearly moved by the suggestion. Eleanor would be honored, he finally said. As am I. Over the next 2 weeks, a new routine emerged. Sophia practiced at the courthouse every Friday, sometimes with Judge Harrington listening, sometimes with him working quietly in a corner. Occasionally, he would offer a suggestion, usually prefaced with Eleanor used to tell her students. These tips, coming from years of his wife's teaching experience, proved invaluable. Word spread around the courthouse about the young pianist and her unusual practice arrangement. Other staff members began finding excuses to pass by the main hall during Sophia's sessions. Some would pause in the doorway to listen for a few minutes before continuing on their way. Mrs. Patel, the evening clerk who had first let Sophia in, became a regular attendee, often bringing paperwork to complete while she listened. My daughter took lessons from Mrs. Harrington years ago, she told Sophia one day. Hearing you play brings back wonderful memories. Even Tom Wilson, the building manager who had originally approved Sophia's use of the piano, stopped by to listen. This is exactly why we fought to get that Steinway, he told Judge Harrington. To bring music into this building. The day before the scholarship audition, Sophia arrived for her final practice session to find several courthouse employees gathered in the main hall. Along with Judge Harrington. What's going on? She asked, confused by the small crowd. We thought you might like a proper audience for your dress rehearsal, the judge explained. If that's all right with you? Touched by the gesture, Sophia nodded. I'd like that very much. She played her full program, the Chopin Ballade followed by Clair de Lune, for her impromptu audience. When she finished, they applauded enthusiastically. Several people wiped away tears. You're ready, Judge Harrington told her afterward, his own eyes suspiciously moist. Eleanor would be so proud. The next day, Sophia's parents drove her to State University for her audition. Judge Harrington had offered to come along for support, but had court proceedings he couldn't reschedule. I'll be thinking of you, he'd promised. Play from your heart. The audition went better than Sophia could have hoped. The panel of judges, 3 music professors from the university, listened intently as she performed the Chopin piece, nodding appreciatively at her interpretation of the difficult coda. When she announced her encore piece would be Debussy's Clair de Lune, played in memory of her former teacher Eleanor Harrington, one of the professors smiled in recognition. I knew Eleanor from music teachers' conferences, she told Sophia afterward. She was a remarkable woman and educator. Your performance would have made her very proud. 2 weeks later, the letter arrived. Sophia's hands trembled as she opened it. Her family gathered around her at the kitchen table. Her squeal of joy told them everything they needed to know before she even read the words aloud. We are pleased to offer you the Hanson Scholarship for Musical Excellence. Her first call was to Mr. Reynolds at school, who whooped so loudly over the phone that Sophia had to hold the receiver away from her ear. Her second call was to Judge Harrington. I got it, she told him, her voice breaking with emotion. I got the scholarship. There was a pause, and she thought she heard him clear his throat. Congratulations, Sophia. Well deserved. I couldn't have done it without your help, and without Mrs. Harrington's teaching. I want to do something to thank you both. 3 days later, Judge Harrington stood at the front of the courthouse's main hall, addressing an unusual gathering. The space had been transformed with rows of chairs borrowed from the jury room, now filled with courthouse employees, Sophia's family, students and teachers from Oak Ridge High, and several of Eleanor's former piano students who had heard about the event through the community grapevine. Music has always been an important part of this county's heritage, the judge said. His usual stern demeanor softened by the occasion. My late wife, Eleanor Harrington, dedicated her life to sharing the gift of music with young people in our community. Today, I am pleased to announce the establishment of the Eleanor Harrington Music Scholarship Fund, which will provide financial assistance to talented young musicians in Pine Creek County. Applause filled the hall as Sophia moved to the Steinway. The plaque that now adorned the piano gleamed in the afternoon light. In memory of Eleanor Harrington, teacher and musician, whose music lives on. As Sophia began to play Clair de Lune, Judge Harrington watched from the front row, his heart fuller than it had been in 18 months. The courthouse piano would now be officially available to local students for practice sessions, supervised by a rotating committee of volunteer music teachers from the community. Life would never be the same without Eleanor, but her legacy would continue, through Sophia, through the scholarship fund, through the music that now regularly filled the courthouse halls. The judge had spent too long living in silence, shutting out the memories because they hurt too much. Now he understood what Eleanor had always told her students. Music heals, music connects, music remembers. When Sophia finished playing and the audience rose in a standing ovation, Judge Harrington stood with them, applauding not just for the talented young woman at the piano, but for the wife he had loved, for the beauty that remained in the world even after loss, and for the new beginning that had grown from what had initially seemed like just an unwelcome disruption to his carefully ordered life.